where just like that, when someone comes up and says something like, I am a God, everybody says, who does he think he is? I just told you who I thought I was, a God. I just told you. That's who I think I am. Would it have been better if I had a song that said, I am a nigga? Or if I had a song that said, I'm a gangster? Or if I had a song...
All right. What's up, Dennis?
Oh, nothing much.
Yeah, so I want to welcome everybody to the Kovu cast. This is like the first time I'm recording since the name change, but I want to talk about hero worship. And Dennis, I've had a bunch of conversations about this Kanye West thing, and hearing different takes from my friend Linnell Bryan has been interesting in terms of Kanye West co-signing Candace Owens. And Candace Owens is a neoconservative woman who is known to criticize the Black community for being victims, playing the race card, and not getting past the past. And Kanye West was like, I like the way she thinks, followed by, endorsements of Trump and, showing off his signed MAGA hat and saying, me and Trump have dragon energy, that's my brother. And then you've had people in Kanye's inner circle. Well, I don't know if Chance the Rapper and John are like inner circle, but close friends that have tried to talk to him, and like John Legend tried to say, like you don't want this to be a part of your legacy. You shouldn't align yourself with Trump. And Kanye West said, you're using that as a tactic of fear to manipulate my free thought. And so it's a lot. It's like every day it's Kanye tweeting something even more inflammatory or something like that. And what's the ramifications of him doing this when he has so many people that look at him as a hero? Because growing up, I did a lot of Kanye West defending, a lot of it, but this Candace Owens thing is just a different beast. And I also want to say that Romfest said 3 years ago, was it 3 years ago? It was around the time when Yeezus came out, that he had to leave Kanye while they were working on the Yeezus album because he wasn't spiritually and mentally right. And what's also interesting is Kanye West did a freestyle that said, and in the freestyle he said, hopped off the Amistad and made I'm a God. I'm a God is a record on Yeezus. And in this case, it can be interpreted that the slave ship he's talking about is, Black consciousness, whereas usually the slave mentality is attributed to being ignorant, not knowing about your history, not being enlightened. But in this case, it can be interpreted as what you call enlightenment is slave mentality, and it's limiting your potential. And so he said he hopped off the Amistad, which is the slave ship, and made I'm a God. And that was during the Yeezus time. So I would say that this isn't nothing really new. It's just now, Kanye really is laying it all out right now. But I just want to put it out there that Romfest did call this behavior out years ago. And people tried to paint him as a hater or a clout chaser or somebody that was, jealous of Kanye, which I didn't get that energy from him at the time. But what do you think of all this? There's a lot of people that look at Kanye West as a hero, and him, taking a hard right, pun intended. What do you think the ramifications of this is?
Well, for the most part, it's going to probably result in a bit of debate and fissuring. So we need to realize that with any community, there's a range of opinions. And the prevailing opinion would definitely not go with someone like Candace Owens.
Yeah.
If Candace was the one saying it alone, for the most part, you might get one or two people calling her out, and then it'd be maybe a week cycle on the internet, if that at all, and then it would be gone. Kanye provides a certain amount of authority behind him. He has a lot of people behind him. And when he speaks, there's a greater ability for people who might be similar to him to feel more confident to speak. So we know that when it comes to elections, Uh, the African American community usually doesn't vote for people like Donald Trump.
Facts.
But there were a number of them that did.
Right.
I think it's somewhere between maybe 1 in 10 and 1 in 20 that did so. So you have a significant number of people that do exist out there that will come out now if they weren't out already. Because now they have someone who can't easily be dismissed, especially not as any of the various name-calling tactics that usually get put out there. Kanye is certainly not doing this so that he can look better in front of people outside of the community. You get the very real feeling that he doesn't care about that. And that sense of genuineness ultimately can come back to harm people. Because if it was just some random guy on the internet, this wouldn't matter.
Right.
The number of people who would come out of the woodwork, or perhaps were neutral, because voting participation rates or political aspirations or people who really care about this isn't uniformly there. So you're going to find a lot of people who would just overlook that. They wouldn't care about Donald Trump. They wouldn't care about Kanye. Or if they would care about Kanye, they certainly wouldn't care about Kanye's politics.
Mm-hmm.
And this kind of situation allows for a sense of debate and a sense of a failure of unity. And I think that might be why there's such a strong reaction against this, and why people might say that he perhaps should be looking to maintain a greater amount of silence on his opinions, because when he speaks, others follow. I imagine that for the minority of people that agree with Candace Owens and with Kanye, and are perhaps either active or closet Trump supporters, this was probably the best thing that happened to them all year, particularly if they're from a colored community. As in, here they have someone that they might look up to, or they might have at least enjoyed his music, coming out and being controversial and supporting them, or at the very least, supporting this kind of mentality.
Well, one thing that I find interesting also is that somebody like Mark Dice, who's always accused Kanye West of being a devil worshiper or having gay sex with like crazy shit, having gay sex as rituals to sell records, he is now saying Kanye West to the rescue. Or you just got all these conservatives that once painted Kanye as some sort of demonic person, and he says this one little thing, and the narrative switches like immediately. It's wild. But off of that, speaking of voting, to segue, I did a poll on Twitter that said, so Kanye West, what do you think of his Trump endorsement? 34% of people said he thinks they think 34% of people thinks that he's a genius, and that's trolling. 9% of people said he's a sunken place god. Sunken place is a reference to Get Out, the coonery or whatever. And then you got 28% of people said I separate the man from the music, and 29% said he's no longer a hero, which is interesting. Just getting into hero worship, because growing up, Wayne was my hero, and people within the industry, because my father didn't necessarily believe in my career path. But as I've gotten older, I'll be 25 next month, May 6th. I look at it almost now as like you're setting yourself up for disappointment, and I think a lot of people are devastated by this. I really do. But one thing I will say that's also interesting is Eminem last year stood up for Black people and advocated for being conscious of what's really going on. And Eminem drew the line in the sand, and he said, if you're a Trump supporter, don't even buy my shit. Just leave my shit alone. Hate me or whatever, because I feel like I'm standing on what's right. And Eminem had a fair amount of Trump supporters and conservative people that loved him. And then you got Kanye West now. It's kind of like the opposite. He's pissing off a lot of his core fans by saying something that is so vehemently antithetical of of what they stand on, what they generally stand on. So, and you got to also remember Kanye West used to be considered conscious. You know, that infamous clip of him saying George Bush doesn't care about black people, and just talking about how the system sets us up to fail, and just a bunch of things like that. And you know, this is a 360. And yes, so some people look at it as a troll. Some people look at it as like, you know, Kanye is going to be Kanye, and you know, as long as the music's fire, I'll support it. And then some people are just saying he's not my hero anymore. What's your thoughts on hero worship in general? Do you think people set themselves up to be disappointed when they do that, or do you think some people are worth being praised as heroes, like, you know, let's say Martin Luther King or something?
Well, let's talk about Kanye first, and then we're going to go straight into hero worship because
Okay.
the way you put it is pretty much spot on. There's a direct relationship between ideation towards the man and the disappointment one feels when there's a betrayal of expectation.
Mm.
So, with regards towards Kanye, you set up that poll pretty well, but, well, pretty well to figure out something along these lines, anyways. But when it came to someone like Mark Dice, I don't really care about Mark Dice at all, but I've watched enough of his videos to have something of a basic understanding of him. I have the very strong opinion that if he was very anti-Kanye in the past, this move is entirely political. There's nothing genuine behind it. This is just one way to score points in the grand conflict that he's fighting. This has nothing to do with Kanye. It has everything to do with someone who's perceived to be an individual in their camp rebelling. And that's the only thing he cares about. I'm sure that if he goes into there and he starts listening to his music and starts quoting it, at least the first few times he does it will be entirely cynical. I don't know. Maybe he might actually like his music. It's hard not to find something of Kanye's that you don't like it, at least on some level.
Yeah.
But at this point, I really doubt that there's any sense of genuineness there. For those who want Kanye to be trolling, I think that's partly due to individuals not wanting to have their figure fail them. I think that they really take solace in the idea that Kanye might be trolling, so to say, in the same way that many Trump supporters might think that Donald is playing some kind of 4D chess, or that he's far-sighted going all the way down the line. And while there might be some wiggle room there, depending on how one views his negotiation strategies, President Trump is not playing 4D chess. I think that's pretty much out there.
Yeah.
Kanye has had a history of perhaps being pro-Trump. I mean, he was caught in a controversy a little while ago as well. I think a year or two back. So I don't think that he's trolling. But I think his fans might want him to troll, might want this to be a troll, because that way they can claim that it was all a joke if Kanye comes out in the next few weeks or months and says, yeah, I was all playing with you. And I think that they would really, really like that. And then there are those who were betrayed by Kanye, or at the very least betrayed by what they thought Kanye was. So they built up an icon, and then the icon disappointed them. To those people who can't try to rationalize that and say that it's a form of trolling, now the response is probably along the lines of, I trusted him, I looked up to him, and I was wrong to do so because of how strong a reaction they have against Donald Trump. I have a feeling that in the future, if it was a different Republican, it might not have been that strong. But there's a very powerful sentiment inside of the conscious community that Donald Trump is something unique. And for people who might have liked Kanye because he called out George W. Bush, and I'm not saying whether or not that call out was accurate or if it was completely false, but for the people who started to look up to him because of that, this will come across like a slap in the face, and they won't know what to do. And so a couple of them might just go cold turkey and say that they're never going to listen to him again. But then there are those who maybe don't care as much about politics. Those people will very easily find a way to separate the politics of the person from the art. In fact, most people do this to some degree. It's only with people that they really dislike or that they really like that the politics and the man and the art all become one thing. As in, that's a very rare occurrence. But it happens. It happens with people of particular infamy and a particular fame. And that means even, I don't know, crayon drawings from when they're 5 can be sold for millions of dollars the nearest time anyone tries to hold an auction on precious relics of a certain hero or villain in history. And I think that might be coming up with it too. But with regards to those who say that they don't care enough or don't want the politics to infect the music, they're coming at it from a different angle. To them, they're like, maybe he's a Republican, maybe he's a closet Republican, or maybe he's just someone who likes Donald Trump. And you know what? I either don't agree with that, but I like his music anyways. I agree with that, so it doesn't really bother me, or I don't care. And there's a very real sense of apathy among some people, and they'll go along with it. And perhaps the very last option is, I am of a particular mindset that we can divorce the man from the art almost always, and it's dumb to not like Kanye's music anymore when we know it's some of the greatest music because of this. And then there was one other option, I think, if my memory is serving. I wish I had this poll in front of me so I don't potentially make a fool out of myself. But this one was the option of Kanye not being a hero for them anymore. I'm not sure if that was its own separate option in the poll or if it's just something that popped up.
Yeah, it's a separate option. So there's Genius Troll, there's Sunken Place, there's I Separate Man from Music, and No Longer a Hero. And 29% said No Longer a Hero. So it's the second most voted on.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I'm not going to comment on the Sunken Place because I think that that's something that I don't know enough about to comment on.
Gotcha.
But if I wanted to make a random guess, that's probably more along the lines of the idea of perhaps being either a traitor or ignorant. And I don't feel confident enough to. I don't really feel confident enough to firmly put my hand on that.
Yeah, no, I definitely understand that. It is like losing yourself almost, like losing yourself and kind of forgetting the core of who you are, your roots, yada yada yada.